everyone, welcome to my studio and welcome to day 4 of NaNoJouMo. Today's prompt is abstract and I am going to do another mixed media page today. I did mixed media yesterday. I've got my trusty paint shirt on and yeah, so I'm going to do mixed media. I pulled out a few different colors of paint. I really have no idea where this is going to go. I fall back on pretty much, I've got a color scheme that I use quite often, and it's just the turquoise blue and the lime green and hot pink. I love hot pink. So I'm kind of just going to start with that and see where that goes. Yeah, I pulled out some of my FW, just dropped one, my FW Artist Acrylic Inks in my favorite colors. I just dropped my green. My green's my favorite. I use this all the time. I love this lime green. And I'm just going to kind of see what happens. If you watched yesterday's video, you will have seen I did a couple of things that I do pretty much every time that I do work with paint. I have a mixed media journal here that anytime I have leftover paint while I'm working on a project, I take that paint and I scrape it into a page on this journal. And then that is a starting place for completed pages. So on yesterday's page I had some of the lighter blue and I did scrape that extra paint onto this page that's just, sometimes they're just a hot mess or whatever, but I did scrape that paint onto here and I placed a stencil on it and rubbed the paint off with a wet baby wipe just to kind of add just another layer of texture. Sometimes whenever I start a page using one of these, I use what was kind of on the background as a jumping start to influence the colors that I'll use then just to use to create the page on top of all that. Sometimes I don't like it at all and I just kind of paint over it, but for some silly reason it makes me feel a little bit better and like I'm not wasting any of my product if I take that leftover paint and scrape it in here. But that's what all of these pages in this journal were started from something similar to, let me get back to the page that we were at, to this. So I did do that, and then the other thing that I always do, especially whenever I use a stencil, and I used a stencil yesterday, but I place that stencil onto a piece of deli paper and try to press off as much of the paint from the stencil onto the deli paper. And then I use these also on my mixed media pages to, a lot of times I glue this down as the first layer. It gives it some texture. Sometimes whatever is on here gets completely covered up. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's just enough to inspire me on what paint colors to use or just some direction to go with that creation that I'm working on at the time. All of my mixed media, well, I've got the dropsies. All of my mixed media art that I create is totally intuitive. I cannot pre-plan it. I can't pre-think it out. I just kind of start. The only thing that I usually, and it doesn't even count as pre-planning, but the only thing that I sometimes start with is maybe colors. But then beyond that, I might just only have one color that I know I'm going to start with, and then I just kind of sit and listen to whatever feels like the right color to put on next, and that's what I put on next. So, but this is also just another way that I'm able to make the most out of all of my paint. I really, really like putting all of my leftover paint onto the deli paper with the stencils for sure, and use it to the first layer on a journal page. I'll use it as the first layer if I make a bunch of ATCs and things like that. It just kind of, it adds just another dimension, another layer of texture on my mixed media art. So I think I'm actually going to go ahead and use this one on today's page. I am also going to go ahead and put another layer of gesso down first to start this one. I can probably say that even if I'm working in just a regular mixed media journal that has white paper in it already, I like starting all of my pages with a layer of gesso. Even if it's not needed, for me it is a way to, it's kind of like when I start painting that gesso on, it's like a trigger in my brain that says it's time to start getting creative. And it helps slow me down, it helps relax. It helps me relax. It helps me get into that mindset that I'm going to be creating and working on something, and that I need to start listening just to how what I'm working on is making me feel, and listening to just that part of me that says, you know what, let's try putting some yellow on after we put this color on. So that's while I'm doing those things, while I'm brushing, while I'm gluing things down, that's kind of what is running through my mind, is I'm just kind of listening to what feels like I should put on next, and then that's what I put on next. So that's what we're going to do first. We're going to put a layer of gesso down, then I'm going to adhere this down, and after that, I'm not really quite sure. With thinking abstract, I was kind of thinking of having some lines on there somehow. So I pulled out this stencil. This is actually not supposed to be used. I think this is actually was originally made to use with rubber stamps and like a foam brush. But I am going to use it with paint. It's just got some lines. I have no idea how old this is. This is really, really old. Y'all, I'm pulling out the old products. Yesterday I used, and I have it over there, I used one of my old Stampin' Up stamp pads that I've had since, good heavens, the early 2000s. So it still works like a charm. So yeah, like I said yesterday, I'm trying to use products that I've had forever, that need some love, that need to be used up. My gesso is old. It is very thick, so it's not wanting to spread very well. It is kind of like frosting right now, and it's not supposed to be this thick, but it's old. This jar is well over a year old, and you can tell. So that's why I'm doing this, is to be using what I have. So that's where I'm going to start, and we'll see how this ends up. And I hope you're enjoying this, and if you have any questions, please ask. If you're playing along, be sure to share if you'd like. I'd love to see what you create. You can use the hashtag NaNoJouMo2021, especially on Instagram, things like that. I will be sure to see it on there. And if you'd like to join the Facebook group, there's a link down below. And you don't have to participate in either of those things. You don't have to share, but either way, I would love to hear if you're playing along, what you think, and if you have any questions. So let's get started with this one and see what happens.